One thing that people are not quick to admit, but I will happily out myself in, is singles are almost always scheming. Isolating and withdrawing is just as destructive as angry outbursts and saying things that you regret.
If you had to grade yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being so healthy, couldn't get healthier, 1 being pretty very, very, very unhealthy, like where would you say you were?
Like in what way? Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually?
Not physically. I'm not trying to call you out for your COVID body.
Marriages, they're either growing, surviving, or dying. And
that's actually, that's accurate.
We flirted with all of them for sure. Where are all the godly, awesome single men? And more importantly, when you find them, how do you know that they're actually who they say they are? I think one of the craziest things is we have a lot of guys pretending to be good, godly guys, but underneath the surface, you never really know what's lurking. So, as one of those guys, Kait is going to grill me today.
You guys are going to get the inside scoop into JJ's testimony as a single man and what he was like when he was actually single and dating people that weren't me.
Yeah, I can tell you about the time where I was who I was, and then the times where underneath the hood, man, it was rotten. Like I was pretending. It
was stinking up the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, JJ, are you ready to get into it?
Yeah. So You're on the hot seat. I haven't seen any of these questions.
Yes, he hasn't seen these questions. You are on the hot seat. You're about to get grilled. Yes, we're talking about all the girls you also previously dated before me. Awkward.
Are you going to be okay?
I don't know.
Dude, everywhere we go, every city, every kind of crowd we run into, Kate's like, I've been on a date right there.
No, that's not true.
Hey, we're going to meet a guy. I may or may not have made out with him, but I just want to give you a heads up.
Okay. Anywho.
Yeah, exactly. You're not even denying it.
So let's talk about you, though. You're on the hot seat, not me.
That's
so
right.
I thought it would be fun to start today by doing some have you ever questions.
Okay.
So these are more yes or no answers, okay? No true explanation unless
no explanation
prompted.
Okay. All right. Okay. Dang, that's hard.
Have you ever asked a girl out and immediately regretted it?
Regretted it? No. Like I went on a date and I regretted that I asked her out.
No, you asked her out and then you're like, actually, I don't really want to go out with
her. I would say no, but I have asked girls out and then just not followed up.
Got it.
Which I'm so embarrassed about that. I hate that I did that. And that happens a lot.
Yes, it does. Have you ever stayed in something too long just because you were a bit lonely?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the easiest things to do. I don't think women understand. Oh, I'm not allowed to explain. Yes.
Okay, go ahead and explain.
Oh, you're curious?
Yes.
I think women don't realize how lonely men can be just because men don't really do friendship well relationally.
You're defending yourself.
No. And so we go to the easiest low-hanging fruit, which is women. So we use women for that intimacy. Yeah.
Next question. Have you ever friend zoned somebody you should have actually given a chance?
Yeah, absolutely.
More than once?
Yeah, multiple times.
More than 10 times?
I don't know. I ran into amazing godly women all the time in my church groups, and I friend zoned them, and I shouldn't have.
Just this follow-up question. That's not a have you ever. Why did you friend zone them?
Man, I just, for some reason, I felt like I had to know if this girl could be my wife before I asked her out on a date.
You were one of those guys.
Oh yeah, big time. And it was so unhealthy. I wrote off so many great godly spouses because somehow I could just tell whether or not they would be my wife before I even got to know them.
Interesting. Have you ever had a what are we situation that dragged on way too long?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I was immature and dating like a little boy, I definitely led girls on, like without clarity and intention and
a flirtationship.
Yeah, definitely. So like that riddled my singleness.
Okay, you're gonna love this. Have you ever been ghosted or actually ghosted someone?
Both. I've been ghosted bad, and I've ghosted as well. And
yikes.
Yeah.
Have you ever been obsessed with someone you barely knew?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
And I'm not just talking about like
Scarlett
Jennifer
Johansson,
Aniston.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Or that.
No, definitely. I think it's such an easy thing to do. Your friend posts an Instagram story of an attractive person. You start checking them out, or like they're a friend of a friend, and you just kind of hyper obsess and daydream about them for sure.
I feel like this is what happened with you and me.
No. No. But I mean, look, it's so easy to do. It feels so good. You just get lost daydreaming into, how this person is perfect.
Have you ever flirted with somebody but had no real intention to actually date them?
Yeah. Like there was definitely a point in my life where I was sending memes, texting, having a good time, hanging out one-on-one with girls, and it felt good. And I was just like, we're just friends, but obviously there's something a little bit more here. And I was too immature to admit that I like them. And for me, it was just that like, why define it? Why ask them out on a date when I can have this and there's no responsibility? Yeah, totally. That's like a avoidance, dream come true.
This one's really fiery.
Yeah. Hit me with some spicier ones. I know.
Have you ever sexted a girl?
You know what? I tried one time and I didn't send anything. I just asked. And I'm so embarrassed.
I don't think I even know about this.
Yeah, you never even knew this. Yeah, like, am I loneliest?
I'm uncomfortable.
No, I know. I am too. Am I loneliest and like kind of darkest, isolated moment? I for some reason asked and she said no. And
was
I'm
this
like,
a girl you were
God.
in a flirtationship with, or like what kind of girl was this?
Yeah, like flirtationship with, like none of us were like kind of committing, but we always like flirted with each other, and like we did make out one time. So
okay.
But it was just, I'm so embarrassed. But yeah, one time, and praise God, she said no and knew her self-worth.
It's good.
Yeah.
Respect for her.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to casually run into someone on purpose?
Did I ever try to casually run into someone on purpose? I think like at some points in my singleness, there's like that friend of a friend who you just have maybe seen on their Instagram stories over a couple months. And you do try to put yourself in their surroundings organically and happen to run into them.
So you did do that.
I think one time I tried to, one thing that people are not quick to admit, but I will happily out myself in, is singles are almost always scheming. We're always scheming to like get ourselves in the same room, proximity, like we're always scheming. So yes, I did scheme to get myself in the kind of, organic interaction.
Okay.
Yeah.
My last and final question until we go into other ones are, have you ever made a list of an ideal wife? And did I match any of the qualities?
Wow. After all those, you asked the heavy hitting. I was not a list guy. For some reason, I don't know why. I never had a list. Part of me in the healthiest way was just like, God, whatever you have for me is going to be better than anything I could list or dream myself. So I'm just going to roll with that. I'll maybe look for a couple things, but other than that, no, I did not ever have a list. And I'm so glad I didn't, because you would have exceeded everything I would have ever had on some list that I could have dreamed up. So
wow.
God really delivered there.
Oh, you're trying to make me blush because you want me to be nice the rest of the interview. All right.
You dude, that was her tough.
Okay. Especially the sexting one. I got you on that one.
Yeah, you did. Did you ever sex anybody?
Yeah, unfortunately. And very unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Back in the day.
We both have blood on our hands.
It's a long time ago, but unfortunately, it's so uncomfortable. Okay, so I would love to start with your foundational years. And I want to know about what you learned about dating / women growing up. Like, what was the foundation for you and belief system?
Yeah, I grew up, I was a missionary kid. So I was born in Belgium. I grew up over in West Tennessee in like an evangelical church, and I definitely just did not learn anything about dating. And my view towards women was, people say traditional in a bad way. There's just so much context when it's like a traditional view. Some people view that as like abusive, headship. and women's just the homemaker. Like, I don't know what people really mean when they say traditional. What I grew up is, hey, woman's purpose is to have kids and stay at home, and the man provides and takes care of her and the children. And that's basically it. Like, a woman's good for making kids and taking care of the home. And that's what you need to find.
Okay.
And so, yeah, to put it simple, that was my limited definition of women. And
what about the example, who shaped your views of godly marriage and how to treat women?
Yeah, man, I hope this speaks to someone who grew up like this. We actually lived a super isolated life. Like, we were not in small groups. We didn't have a ton of families around us. We lived a super isolated kind of Christian family life. And what's hard is, if you grow up in a home like that, really the only marriage you get to see is your parents. And of course, every marriage is imperfect, but I would just say, man, that I think I remember twice my parents going out on a date my whole entire life. Like, they were just roommates in the same house. And my dad had no curiosity and interest in my mom. My mom was just kind of like just trying to make it and raise the kids by herself in some ways. Like, he would provide for the family and then just kind of like check out, watch TV, and then maybe do some things that he loved, like hunting and watching football, and would take his kids along for the ride. But man, it was super sad. So yeah, I didn't have, until I left the house at 18, I didn't have a lot of examples of godly marriage.
So who taught you how to treat women? Did anybody teach you how to treat a woman or pursue a woman?
So how I learned how to treat women, I mean, look, your dad and how he treats his wife and any daughters in your family is your first experience.
Yeah.
Like, that is what you know is like your baseline for normal. And until you see anything else, like, what you see is normal. And so my dad had a really, really negative way of relating with a lot of sarcasm, a lot of poking fun. His definition of love was, because I love you, we can have banter, I can cut, I can take cheap shots. As long as it's funny, I can really, really poke hard. Yeah. And my mom and sister kind of tolerated or had to adjust to it. So I thought that was normal. If you love someone, especially a girl, you tease them, you play with them, you poke at them. Regardless of how mean it is, as long as it's funny, then yeah, that's what a loving relationship was. So I definitely related to women in that kind of way. And it really is, it's super flirtatious, but it can be really hurtful and harmful.
Yeah.
And the other one is it's so surface level. Like, it's not deep, it's not nurturing, it's not loving, it's not caring. It's just such a superficial, cheap way to connect and flirt.
So another question, kind of in the similar line, is what shaped your views on attraction and physical beauty?
I mean, when you're a boy in today's age, your dad, like, what he comments as beautiful and how I still remember my dad nitpicking Megan Fox for having like a weird thumb. I think she has like a weird toenail or a weird thumb. And I was like,
wow, okay.
That's what I learned, to like, no matter how beautiful a woman is, you could always nitpick and find something wrong with her.
Is that true?
Yeah,
okay, that's
it is.
So crazy.
Is that not crazy?
That he would do that.
You can look. Do you want to look it up?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so Kait just looked it up.
Yes, she has a very distinctive thumb shape known as brachydactyl type D, often referred to as club thumbs or toe thumbs.
Okay, so she's got weird thumbs. So that's Megan Fox. And my dad, the first thing he says about her is, like, she's got weird thumbs. So that's how I kind of learned, but I always kind of felt wrong. I kind of knew it felt wrong. The other way I would say is, man, I know I'm roasting my dad here, but I just have to be honest. It was really sad because I saw him relate to women, and he would only kind of turn up the charm or the relational, like, how present he was in connecting with them if they were beautiful. So whether it was a waitress, one of my mom's friends, whatever it is, if they were beautiful and charming, he would definitely be all in.
Yeah.
As soon as maybe she was overweight or unattractive or blah, 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 MIA. Like,
didn't give her the time of day.
Literally, like, pretended like they didn't exist.
Wow.
So that always sat wrong with me. So I guess out of that judgment, I was always just like, regardless of what a woman looks like, I want to just be present and connect with her. But yeah, I that's what I grew up with, for sure.
So that kind of transitions to, in a different way, to porn. And if you ever struggled with that, and that journey, which I happen to know, but I want you to share with other people.
Yeah. Look, for me, I discovered porn on the family desktop computer at 3:30 in the afternoon when my parents were both working. I got home from school and, you find a way. Like if there's internet, a boy will find a way to find porn. So, yeah. And the thing with porn that is true is like with any addiction really is it always starts soft. It always starts, like just a peak and then it's a slow fade into oblivion, and that's how you stop and look around and you find yourself with any addictive behavior. You just can't even recognize the person in the mirror. So for me, it started at probably 12 or 13 years old on the family computer. And then from there, I got my first cell phone and I would text pictures from the computer to my cell phone. I learned about masturbation. I just stumbled upon it on a family road trip in the back seat. Just, like you're a teenage boy and I'll just stop there. But yeah, that pattern and that, I always just learned porn was like cocaine for my soul. And that's really true. I mean, that was a hard one. I'd say 13 to 23 years old, just off and on, 24, off and on, like literally go a whole year without looking at it and you white knuckle it and then you stumble into it the next year and all of a sudden you feel so much shame, you isolate and then you're back to a year of looking at porn again. So I don't think, I think the sobriety of it's always something that a man will struggle with and can struggle with. That is the healthiest place to be. Like it's never really beat in the sense of until I'm like fully sanctified in Christ. That I think that urge always lives within a man.
Yeah.
And that's a healthy understanding to live. And for me, I was so emotionally dysfunctional and disassociated. I was so bad at processing my feelings. It became my go-to numbing out coping, mechanism when I experienced pain, failure, or loneliness, any kind of big negative emotion. Boom, porn, first thing to do to escape those feelings.
How did you break out of it?
Yeah, I think nothing really changed until I had accountability, with some Christian guy friends in Seattle. But to be honest, I think some other ways is I think I replaced it. Like I think I replaced porn with just other behaviors and so being porn free is great and all, but at the same time, if you just replace one addictive behavior with another, I'm like, well, I don't really think you fixed the problem. That's why I don't think porn is really the problem. It's a huge problem, but I don't think it's the problem. Like there's a root underneath it, which is, emotionally being completely disconnected from your heart and soul that just eviscerates you. And so for me, I had an intimacy problem. I had an emotional issue. I had a sin problem. So for me, that we separate emotion and spirituality like they're not the same thing. For me, the day I read the quote, like you can only be as spiritually mature as you are emotionally mature, like everything kind of made sense. That was like a magical moment in my life because I'm like, oh, this is emotional and spiritual. Like there's a war of flesh in my emotion here. Yeah. And the solution is Christ and a relationship with him. And it's amazing how that relationship and intimacy with Christ and brothers solves something like porn. You can white knuckle it. You can get the porn blockers. You can have accountability. But until you really heal the root issue, then, I mean, like what's going to change? You're just trading one addiction for another somewhere else in your life.
So I have another question on this topic. You were a virgin when we got married, but can you unpack for me how maybe you weren't in some ways?
Yeah, man, I was a virgin and I felt so terrible for people who weren't a virgin because there was just so much judgment growing up. Like for me, my virginity is one of those prized things that I really cherished and guarded. But like in retrospect, and especially when we got married, I was just like, people were like, what's the difference? Like I had oral sex, and I felt up women and, we bump and grind under pillows and covers and I would have an orgasm that way. Like I understand there is a, something happens maybe when it's just like the penetrative sex. But I'm like, spiritually for me, I'm like, what's the difference between, I think that kind of gate is anytime you share an orgasm, that is such a surreal, deep spiritual experience. That's where your soul gets tied to anything and everything that you set your heart upon. So whether it's like a picture of a girl on the internet, whether it's AI or real or fake, it's an object, it's a person, with you that you're not married to, like, I don't care what it is. You have tied your soul to that person. I think spiritually that's where it happens through that orgasm. So yeah, while I was not I didn't have a sex, with a girl before my wedding. I tied my soul to so many hundreds, if not thousands, of women over a decade of porn and hooking up with girls, and at different times in my life. And there's obviously a lot of shame and regret and all of that. And I just think for anyone who's here, like whether you're a virgin or not, I think your purity of heart is the most important thing that matters to God. And I thank God that I've been washed and just cleansed, and there's been redemption in my marriage. But, whether you've done penetrative sex or any kind of other version of sex, or you've just masturbated to something else, man, I'm like, all of them are a big deal. Like, we might stack one higher than the other, and some of them have different repercussions and consequences. But from God's point of view, like, they're all the same size. They're all big deals, and all of them are enough to ruin your life and you're standing before God. And that's why God's, mercy is just so amazing. But I always felt like something's wrong with the judgment of virgin versus non-virgin. Like, to just simplify sex to that is, it always just felt wrong to me.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I would totally agree. And, I've shared some of my story on that as well, where I have a past, but then I've dated people who were virgin and like made me feel really bad about my past, even though they were addicted to porn, also having orgasms with people. And so, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
It's like you get labeled not a virgin, and then it's like, well, I'm stained, even though the Lord doesn't look at me that way. And even though the person who has the stamp of virgin, which is just, it's so much more about the purity of heart. Why can't we just say they're pure of heart? Like they have a purity of heart and intention versus like they're virgin, non-virgin.
Yeah. Imagine this. Imagine if we got married and you've had sex with one person and you've never masturbated, looked at porn. You've just had sex with one person one time. Okay. And then imagine me who's never had sex with a girl, but like in that way, but I've had tons of oral sex. I've looked at porn for 2 decades. I've looked at 10,000 naked women and masturbated in an orgasm. Like, who's more unclean? You know what I mean?
Or who has more of an unpure heart in ways.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Like,
so,
and who's going to come in with more issues and really damage, tough. Right? It's so much more deep and complex than just whether or not you've had sex. So I feel super adamant to just look, it's so much deeper. It's so much more complicated than just whether or not you had sex. And I'm a big proponent of men who are on their high horse walking in pride and arrogance. Like, you are not jacked up sexually as well, because you are. But the second when we give ourselves an excuse, Christ's blood is meaningless. Christ didn't really die for that much for me, but he did for you. You got a big bad problem. I'm like, man, look in the mirror. Like, you are, and that's what I would say to JJ, and I always felt like that was the Holy Spirit's reminder. Is like, hey buddy, you are jacked up here and you have blood on your hands. And the more you realize that, the more you realize how precious God's sacrifice for you was, like what he purchased and freed you from, and how far you've come, and how much you just don't deserve it. And so when I look at my sexuality like that, I'm like, man, if you just knew what I thought of last night at 10 o'clock, if you just knew where my mind went, and I've been forgiven of that, how can I not afford you, the same mercy and grace that I've been afforded?
Yeah, amen. So when it came to dating girls with this kind of porn history and just no example for how to treat women, were you the boundary setter, physical boundary setter or not? We talk a lot about how the man should ideally lead those conversations. So I'm curious on how you were when you were dating.
Yeah, man, I'm most unhealthy. Basically, I knew if this girl was not really a Christian, I could get away with bad behavior. And no, I would not set boundaries. And then if this girl was a Christian and she was pursuing, and I wanted to impress her and maybe marry her or whatever, it was, and it was like within a Christian circle, I would set boundaries and be in good boy behavior. So.
And wouldn't cross them?
Sometimes, I would sometimes cross them for sure.
Yeah.
I would at least, check the box and look like a good guy, and pretend. But it was, but the thing about that heart, it was like what other people might think about me. My reputation might get out. There's a lot to lose here. I'm going to set the boundaries because, I'm scared of what other people might think about me.
Right. I'm doing this because I have to. And it's a safe face.
Man, my heart was just in such a bad place, man. So I didn't really believe in those boundaries. And that's why I would cross them, Yeah. That I wasn't doing them because I knew the beauty and the love. And I had a healthy fear of God and how to treat women. Man, so that's why your heart just matters underneath those boundaries.
So true. So you're talking a lot about your childhood, things that you witnessed from your parents and some of that brokenness. But I do have another question, and then I want to get into like transformation story. But up until like, even to the point you met me or whatever point, did you really think that you ever had like quote trauma in your life?
I wouldn't have used the word trauma. My mom does inner healing. So I was exposed to inner healing around 16, 17 years old, which was really transformative for me emotionally. But I would have never have called it trauma. I definitely had a tendency to minimize my pain and my story and whatever happened to me as a kid and compare it with bigger things in the world and other people's stories. So yeah, I would definitely have minimized anything and everything that happened to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's actually what happens with a lot of people these days, to be honest. They grow up in a seemingly a good Christian home, like yours had issues, but like on the surface, people could have claimed they have a great Christian family. They're missionaries. Look at all these great things. And so you get to adulthood and you're like, well, I don't have that many big trauma. Like I wasn't abused by somebody. My parents stayed together all throughout my childhood, so they weren't divorced, And so you kind of go through this litany of like, well, no, I don't have trauma. I don't have like any baggage in my past at all.
Totally, yeah. And you don't know whether or not your childhood was filled with trauma or abuse until you're around health. Like until you're around health and you see stuff that just looks foreign and alien, you're just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to get around healthy community, healthy, godly marriages, healthy families. So you can kind of like compare and contrast, be like, wait a second, like that's real.
Yeah.
Like men say that to their wives, like they apologize and they're kind.
Yeah.
And they don't just lay down their foot like, oh, that's what healthy masculinity looks like. I didn't realize I grew up in an abusive home until I went to therapy and told people what actually happened. And they're like, dude, that's abuse. Like that is physical and emotional abuse and spiritual abuse. So you just don't know that. Like you keep it to yourself, you justify it, whatever, you forgive it. But sometimes you don't really realize the extent of how sinister the abuse or the trauma you grew up in until you share it.
And those things didn't really come up for you, a lot of them, until we were married.
Yeah, some came out before, like you knew they were just wrong, and some came out, after for sure. Like you just realize like there's this whole gap. Like for me, like protection of my wife more than Eleanor is really hard for me because I just grew up in an environment where you had to get over it. And I didn't really have anyone protect me. And so guess what? When I'm an adult, I might pretend like I'm protecting you and listening to you, but what am I saying in my heart of hearts while you're complaining and you're struggling and you're worrying about something? Like, get over it. Because that's all I was told. That's the only message I got.
Yeah.
And I made it this far, so can you.
Well, your coping mechanism was minimizing, but that's also what you saw, witnessed around you, minimizing.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, look, for a guy specifically, it's hard to give ourselves permission to talk about some of these things.
So for a guy who doesn't think that he has trauma, You know, I think especially guys might go there. I see it statistically, women are more willing to buy self-help books, do some of that work, sign up for therapy. Guys are becoming more and more open, but I feel like a lot of times guys get into a relationship with a girl and, you know, maybe she's anxiously attached and he's avoidantly attached. It's a very common situation. And he is like, whoa, she has a lot of issues. She has a lot of anxiety. She has control. She has all these things. And look at her past. Like, oh my gosh, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, meanwhile, I'm chilling. I'm actually secure. I'm healthy. I dated a guy in the past. I have anxious attachment. He very much has avoidant attachment. But we went to my therapist and he spent the hour telling my therapist, who I had worked with for a long time, how I was the issue and it's all my attachment issues and how he didn't have any. And I do think that as an avoidant leaning guy who was very suppressed, very deeply suppressed, like it's very easy to just think, oh, I'm not the issue at all. It's definitely them.
Yeah, man. I would just say, like, just because you have suppressed your emotions and you're dead emotionally doesn't mean you get the right to drag someone into the grave with you.
Yes.
You know, especially another person's. But listen, that you are asking something that person is not capable of giving you.
Yeah.
Empathy and safe space. And someone is not capable of giving you empathy and safe space that you crave unless they've experienced it themselves.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with someone who is just like that, you know, like what I've definitely been in the past, like, I'm sorry, but your expectations, like you are asking someone, you know, in a wheelchair to run 100 yards. Like they are not capable at that moment. Now through like rehab and surgery and getting healthy, they can definitely get there. But, you know, so if you're on the other side of that, I'm so sorry, but your expectation is just off. Like they cannot give you that because people can't give the gift of love, connection, attunement unless they have experienced it themselves first.
Yeah.
And I just feel my heart breaks because there are so many men walking around, limping around, just dead inside who every human was built to want it and they just have never gotten it. And that, I can't tell you this, it just feels like such a luxury for men to actually be able to experience safe space and have their feelings matter. Like that for me for the longest time was, oh, wow, that's a luxury. Talk about my feelings. Like someone cares. Yeah, right. Like,
well, in even step one, knowing what they are.
Yeah. And even if I did, you know, feel them, like, who am I supposed to talk to them with? You know, talk about them with, like, yeah, feelings are for the weak, ignorant, needy people. And that's not me. Right.
So, you know, this has come up in our marriage, so I'm just going to bring it up. But like, and this was our dynamic, you know, I'm anxiety, I have all these things. And I see this a lot for guys where they've grown up, the avoidant and leaning guy, minimize, you know, disconnect. That very much is more acceptable than the opposite, which is the girl who maybe is anxious, more dramatic, voices feelings. She feels to the guy very needy, very clingy sometimes, like all of these things.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be guy and girl though.
It doesn't. Yeah. No, but statistically it is oftentimes that way, but that doesn't mean it always is.
Stereotypically it might.
Stereotypically. Yeah. So I want you to speak to that guy who maybe is listening who's like, yeah, well, I haven't really, like, I'm not that emotional. Like, I'm pretty cool. I'm pretty chill. Yeah. Like, it's still pretty bad it's just as bad, actually, if you're not connected to your heart as the girl who is super anxious or throwing a quote tantrum and all of that.
Yeah. Look, isolating and withdrawing is just as destructive as angry outbursts and saying things that you regret. You know, like, let me put it this way. I love the story. There was a kid growing up struggling with anger and temper tantrums. Every time the kid messed up, his dad made him go out to the fence in the back and nail a hole in the fence. So after time, as the kid kind of grew up, realized this is not behavior that you can do. I have to be respectful and kind and polite. Every time the kid did do something kind, respectful, the dad would send him out back and he would remove a nail from the fence. And pretty soon there was no more nails left. And the teaching was, when he brought him back to the fence, said, you might have pulled out all the nails, but the holes still remain. Like, meaning there was damage done. That's even though you've changed, there's still damage that was incurred. And we say, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. The kid was, breaking stuff, cursing people out, throwing huge fits. And now The kid, though, who withdrew to his room, escaped and fantasy, who maybe disassociated, while it's not as demonstrative, that is still just as destructive as hitting a nail into the fence, right? So, but the reputation, the external kind of picture of that, it doesn't look as bad. So it's a lot easier to get away with, maybe even praise sometimes. And really, it's just as destructive, relationally, to withdraw like that.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm not saying that you have to figure out every fight in person and you can never leave. I definitely think there's a lot of health and wisdom to saying, hey, I need 5 minutes.
Right.
I can feel myself getting upset. Is that okay? So asking to leave and getting permission and making that understood, like, I'm going to come back. We're still going to address this. That's totally okay. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is when you isolate, suppress, and disattach, we can sometimes have this like false sense that I am emotionally healthy and you're not.
Yeah. It's like a pride, ego, like, wow, she's crazy or he's crazy. Like, that's a lot. They're a lot. I'm just chilling over here.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you're just completely disconnected from your heart and emotions and probably minimizing them, disattaching from them.
Totally. To be healthy, you can not just think, but you can also process and regulate your feelings and emotions as well, which is incredibly hard to do.
Okay, so very powerful. I want to know, as we kind of go towards the end of this interview, was there a turning point for you?
What's funny? I think God gives amazing testimonies where you're crying out, you're on the ground, and something radical happens and God speaks. That wasn't my story. And I think that might be more common than the radical testimony. For me, nothing really changed until one, I admitted that there was problems. Like, I could be honest and look in the mirror and say, like, you're a messed up cowboy. You got some problems, buddy. And then two, I actually, put myself in a community of guys who were chasing after God in a similar, if not better way than me. And I was vulnerable with them. For me, I didn't know the difference between transparency and vulnerability. Transparency is I could confess things, talk about things, but I still controlled the narrative. A good example I like to give is, hey, last night I was a bad husband. Well, okay, well, that's nice of you. Thank you for admitting that. That was nice of you. I'm sure it's okay and there's grace. And then a vulnerability is like, hey, I have to confess something. There's a 6-inch hole in my drywall over there, and I dropped 20 F-bombs, and I'm feeling a ton of shame because I was a awful man last night.
There's not one, by the way, guys.
Right. No, there's not one. But my favorite definition of vulnerability is like, I'm handing you the knife.
Yeah.
Look, the reality is this: until something gets exposed in the light, it will never change. And I can't tell you, one of the biggest themes of my immature Christian life was I can confess it to God, but I don't have to confess it to other people. And I stayed stuck for years.
Oh, yeah.
I stayed stuck for years with the same patterns of sin because I held that thought. And and that's why James is so important. If you confess out loud with others, then you will be healed. So healing doesn't happen until you can confess it out loud. And I've found the more people I can tell and confess and talk about something, the more healing I find I receive in a lot of ways. Like,
looking back when you met me, how do you think, knowing all that you know now, because you have come a long way, so have I. Like, I feel like we've grown a lot since that time in 2021. Looking back now and knowing all that you know, what, if you had to grade yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being so healthy, couldn't get healthier, 1 being pretty very, very, very unhealthy, like where would you say you were?
Like, in what way? Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually?
Not physically. I'm not trying to call you out for your COVID body. Yeah, physically. No. More emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah.
Give it the whole package for like how fit you were to be dating.
Man, I think the worst place to be is thinking you're healthier and in better shape than you really are, which is pride. And the bigger that difference, the less you need God and the less you need other people. And I even just last week, man, I was so humbled on our marriage. Like I learned I can't even forgive you for resentment, wrong, pain. I can't even forgive you without Christ. That's how powerless I am. Like I have been humbled and humbled. I cannot do the most basic things relationally, emotionally, spiritually without Christ. So I just look at the vast majority I've lived my life with trying to do it myself. And yeah, I mean, like I was like, you know, in some ways a 2, 3, 4. I really struggle with this question because every year you grow, you look backwards and you just see, you know, all the wrong beliefs you had, maybe where you were emotionally. Like it's hard not to look back. And I hope every year I live on this earth, I can look back and be like, oh, JJ, oof. Like a year ago today.
Yeah, it is a hard question because you learn and you grow so much and you look back and you're like, wow, I wasn't as healthy as I thought back then.
So all I can hope, seriously, my biggest prayer is that every single year I can look back and say, woof, you've come a long way. I want that kind of life where at 70 years old, I can look back at 69 years old and be like, man, woof. I'm glad you had believers and God in your life because you've come a long way. Like I want to be growing that much. So yeah, I would just say this. In some ways, I think God gave me a really agreeable, friendly personality. Like there's maybe some like a natural disposition to be kind and loving. And what's really hard about that is like it's really easy to kind of confuse that with being emotionally and spiritually mature. You know what I mean? Like if I just have that kind of natural personality, it's really easy to make the mistake of like, yeah, like I am healthy. Because a lot of people tell me I'm nice and kind and funny and blah, blah, blah. So really at the end of the day, you got to be honest, like regardless of my personality, how is my heart and soul with God? Am I connected with him daily, walking with him? Am I relying upon him and other people? And that's the hardest thing about judging your health is in your heart of hearts and your soul, only you really know that. And that's why it's hard to even judge people off fruit and actions. I mean, I think about all the time, like people are like, I prophesied and healed in your name and it's away from me for I never knew you. So that's the only thing that really matters is like, do you know Christ? Do you actually have a cultivating, growing relationship with him? And that's what I would probably wrap that on is you're either cultivating, here's what I've learned. You're either cultivating and growing in your relationship with Jesus Christ, the living God and the Holy Spirit, or you're not.
Right.
Like it is, you are either growing or you are not. And for just a long time in my life, I just was coasting and I was not. And man, that's what I would say.
Well, JJ, it was such a pleasure to have you on the Heart of Dating podcast today.
Dude, you grilled me, man.
We got into it.
Yeah, you grilled me.
Good job, honey.
I love you. I'm so grateful for you.
I feel like you weren't my husband in this interview. I was like interviewing a guy.
It was fun, but you did a great job and you've just been so patient with me. I'm so sorry. Like look back a lot with just a lot of regret and sadness of just how much pride I've carried into our marriage, and you know, just the poison I drank and I'm tempted to drink all the time is you're the problem, not me. You know, and it is the most destructive lie you can believe in marriage is you're the problem, not me.
Well, I've believed that lie too.
Yeah. Well, we both have blood on our hands. So man, I love having a partner who's 100% in on our marriage and growing. And, you know, marriages, they're either growing, surviving, or dying. And
that's actually, that's accurate.
We flirted with all of them for sure. You know, like there's just different times and moments. So
we flirted with them all for sure.
But the best thing about marriage is that it was a responsibility greater than my current character. And I just think that's where men thrive. They have a greater responsibility on their hands than their current character. And they either get to rise up to that occasion or they run away.
Yeah.
And the problem with me in my 20s was I just was chasing pleasure and fun, and I ran from responsibility.
Yeah.
And real men run to responsibility and they embrace it. And so the best thing ever for men, especially single men, is finding and putting yourself in positions where you have a huge responsibility. You know,
It's good.
because it forces you to grow up.
So good.
Yeah.
Thank you, JJ.
Yeah, I love you.
Thanks for sharing your
Yeah,
story.
I love you so much. Yeah.
The Heart of Dating podcast is created by Kait and JJ Tomlin. Shout out to our epic audio and video editor, Scott Caro. We have an amazing Heart of Dating team who helps bring the show to you each week. I want to shout out Lena Gibson, our brand and community manager. We couldn't do it without them. Now, if you guys have never ranked us or reviewed us on iTunes or Spotify, would you consider doing that? It would mean so much because our podcast can get more discovered and more people can learn how to better date as Christians. Don't we all want that? We launch our podcast each and every week on Wednesdays, so we will see you next week.